On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA is a dynamic podcast that brings together some of the most influential voices in the nation.
From union leaders and elected officials to law enforcement experts who explore the pressing issues shaping America.
Through thought-provoking conversations, we empower listeners to think critically about law enforcement, political policy, and the future of our society.
Available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and all Suffolk PBA social media platforms. Tune in to On Patrol with the Suffolk County PBA.
Welcome to another episode of On Patrol with the Suffolk PBA. I'm CJ Hutter, the treasurer of the PBA.
I'm Tanner Brandenburg, the Sergeant at Arms of the PBA.
And today we're doing a quick short episode with having the president, Lou Civello, back on. And we just wanted to talk about a report that was recently put out. And we've been discussing it a lot in the office about a Newsday report that kind of had a tone of negativity, but we saw it as really a story of success among our cops out there on the road.
Yes, absolutely. Well, first, let me start by congratulating both of you on the tremendous job you're doing with this podcast. That was, not that long ago that I was the first guest on the show. And since then, you've had thought leaders. You've had some of our most prominent elected officials. You've had leaders in law enforcement on the show, just doing a phenomenal job. And you're both sort of internet sensations at this point. So well done. You are doing the membership proud. You were talking about issues that are critical to not only our law enforcement officers out there, but to public safety in general. So just great job and congratulations on this whole show.
Well, thank you. It means a lot coming from you.
And thank you for joining us again.
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure. And so to your point, that article in Newsday, that was based on the Human Rights Commission's annual report. And the Human Rights Commission and that report was born out of police reform. So police reform was done under Governor Andrew Cuomo. It was a knee-jerk reaction to the whole George Floyd incident, where something that happened thousands of miles away somehow necessitated the need for revolutionary changes here in Suffolk County. A lot of it didn't make sense, but I will say, at least at the time, we had a seat at the table. So those were some negotiated reforms. It was a compromise trying to balance transparency with the need for officer safety, victims' rights, etc. And what we came out with was this collaborative effort where the Human Rights Commission would have a certain level of oversight. They would be reviewing some of the things that Internal Affairs did. They would be looking at some of our practices and procedures. And every year they issue a report. And by and large, this year was a tremendous success. So if you read the entire report, which is dozens of pages long, it basically paints a picture that this is working, that we are doing a great job of policing the county. We have given unprecedented transparency by recording the great majority of our interactions with the public, thousands and thousands of police interactions, traffic stops, calls for service, all recorded on body camera. By and large, Internal Affairs and the Human Rights Committee have agreed on the outcomes of cases that were investigated by Internal Affairs, so that we are doing just a fantastic job. It's actually overall, it's a glowing report of the status of the Suffolk County Police Department. But if you read the Newsday report, you would think that somehow it was a terrible report, because they chose to focus on one minute detail: 83 calls out of all the interactions we've had with the public weren't captured on body camera. And because of that, they painted a picture where somehow we're trying to hide things and erode the public trust, which nothing could be further from the truth. It was a misrepresentation of the report. When you read it, unless you go back and read the actual report, you wouldn't know that. You would think the whole thing is an indictment of the system. And it really is why there is a great distrust of the media. You're not getting the full story. And I don't blame Newsday. They have a job to do. They need to sell papers. I don't even blame the reporter, who is, I think, one of the best reporters at Newsday, who wrote the story. I think, he has to take some of his cues from the editorial board, just like a lot of us have to listen to our bosses. And if they tell you to go in a certain direction, you have to go in a certain direction. And they did take the time to get a quote from me, although not the whole quote was included. It was just a portion of it. So again, I get why the media does what it does, but it really underscores the importance of having platforms like this one.
100%.
Right. Yeah. Like just being able to get the full story in long format, to be able to tune into the people that actually do police work, that are out there on the ground, that are facing life and limb. I mean, the same day that story aired, right? We were standing at a police funeral in New York City. And, part of my quote was, we don't police on a movie set.
Right.
I mean, taking camera footage is secondary to officer safety, right? Being camera ready is always going to be secondary to us surviving. And that's, one major reason why something may not be caught on body cam, because our priority, like in the instance that we just had, where we had an officer shot in the face, is not to turn on the camera around and, ready, set, camera. It's to come home at the end of the day to your family. That is the priority, to protect life, to protect the public. It's not to make sure that in each and every single instance that every minute detail is captured on body camera footage. Now, that's not to say that capturing body camera footage isn't a priority. Of course it is. And we captured the great majority. We're talking about, I think, 83, right? Somewhere around there. Yeah, 83, 87, whatever it was. Instances that they referred to where these things weren't captured on camera. And there are circumstances where it is completely appropriate, most critically officer safety, but also others, like where we might be talking about a sexual assault, where there might be a witness who wants to divulge information, but maybe doesn't want to be captured on camera because he's afraid of the bad guy retaliating and is not going to be willing to give you that information or become a confidential informant. Confidential informants are sometimes developed out in the field on traffic stops. Right. So there might be instances where it's critical for that body camera not to be on because it's actually hindering our ability to do our job. And that's why if there is an instance where the camera is not on and it does get investigated by internal affairs or by your supervisor, and they deem it appropriate that the camera wasn't on, or maybe they deem it this was a training issue, like those issues are addressed by and large. So that there is no substance to this charge that we're somehow eroding public trust by this tiny de minimis amount of calls that were not captured on body camera. Overall, this is unprecedented transparency into the way we police the public. You name another profession, I don't care if it's the surgeon or it's the teacher in the classroom, where that amount of their day, that amount of what they do is captured on camera. Doesn't exist outside of policing, right? I mean, that's what I'm talking about the NFL here, where we're going back to the instant replay. We're one of the few professions that have this, and we're one of the few professions where people are trying to kill us. Right. I mean, so, unfair report. And again, it goes back to the work that the two of you are doing here, that many law enforcement unions are starting to come on board with enough of going through this filter, enough with having to rely on the media to report truthfully. We're going to go direct to the public. We're going to speak to you ourselves. We're going to get the true story out there. And again, that's why this platform is so important. And I once again, just thank you and congratulate you for the work that you're doing here.
Well, thank you for that. And one of the things I want to point out too is it's really the headline that was the biggest issue in this story. Because when you point out that Suffolk County police officers failed to activate body-worn cameras 83 times in a 12-month period, it sounds like somebody who's just scrolling through the paper and sees this headline thinks this is a story about the department failing in policy. But in reality, it's a story of success because we have over 500,000 interactions with the public every year. And they're focusing on only 83 times where there wasn't the full footage they were looking for. And there are instances where we purposely turn off the body camera because we're discussing tactics. Maybe there's an armed individual inside of a house. The day this story came out, one of our cops was shot, right? So these things are real world problems, real world scenarios where we want to turn off this body camera footage because we're discussing something. And we want to point out that this was a success story, not a failure story based on the headline.
Yeah, certainly a success story. And I think, sometimes these media companies give this perception that it's like watching Law and Order, right? Like, well, I need to have body camera footage or it didn't happen. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for the police mission. It's dangerous for public safety. It's dangerous when you get a jury in the courtroom where if you don't have body camera footage, if you don't have DNA, all of a sudden they don't want to convict because there isn't this definitive 1,000% evidence in front of them. It's not always possible in reality. You don't wrap things up in a 30-minute series like you do on TV. And when these media publications do this and they sort of malign us unjustifiably, it really hurts public safety in general.
I think it's really a clickbait headline story. When you look at the title of the story and what it's pointing out, the 83 instances, I think it fails to highlight that there's a concurrence rate of over 87% between the Human Rights Commission and IAB, that we're doing our jobs out there, that overwhelmingly our cops are doing the right thing out there. And they failed to highlight that in this article. I think that's a big part that's missing of this.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. So when you look at an 87 concurrence rate. So that's a rate where the Human Rights Commission agreed with the outcome of what Internal Affairs did. I mean, that's tremendous.
Yes.
Don't forget, these are two very separate and distinct entities. So what you have is essentially civilians Monday morning quarterbacking law enforcement, right? So there's not really another walk of life where you see that very much. Like if you have lawyers and you want to look at lawyer conduct, you go to the Bar Association, right? It's other lawyers looking at it. If it's doctors, it's a panel of doctors overlooking what they did.
Right.
Very rarely do you have a novice, an untrained person overlooking what experts did and then second guessing them. So for us to have that concurrence rate, that means we are really going above and beyond to make sure that we're doing everything right. So I think that is tremendous. That is a success story. And that should have been the title of the article. But instead, again, they focused on a minute detail because it's more sensational.
Especially because this is such a new thing, too. It's only the second annual report. So 87%, that's a large number, especially for how new it is.
Yeah, and most certainly, you think there would be more divergence there, right? You would think there would be a separation, especially from the picture that's painted, that this oversight was so direly needed and things were so bad that we have to have this second set of eyes overlooking everything that we do. I mean, in reality, we are one of the most scrutinized professions in existence.
Oh,
right?
no doubt.
Right? No one is held more accountable than police officers. No one's overlooked more. There's no one on body camera. If you do something in your personal life as a police officer, where if you worked for Amazon or if you worked for the local grocery store, it's probably not going to affect your job, right? But if you do something in your personal life as a police officer, it can have tremendous effect up to and including, being terminated here for a code. You're expected to have that higher standard. You're expected to be held to this much higher standard as a police officer. And what you do in your personal life certainly has an effect. And you're held up to scrutiny. I know I've been to Internal Affairs dozens and dozens of times, as a union representative, where IA is just ripping apart an officer's personal life, right? And there's no expectation of privacy, no matter how personal the issue might be. They're diving in. You're compelled to answer, and I'd be hard pressed to think of other careers where you're held to that level of scrutiny.
Right, and the model we have here with the Human Rights Commission, there are similar models throughout the country. Not everywhere in America is there a civilian complaint review board like New York City has, where, like you put it, how civilians are scrutinizing the actions of cops when they've never stepped foot in a patrol car, where they've never responded to a 911 call and have zero level of experience.
Yeah, civilian review boards are by and large an abortion, right? They have such a detrimental impact on public safety. Take a look at anywhere they've gotten a foothold, and you're going to see a crime-ridden city, right? Mm-hmm. A city that has lost its way, a city that it's not safe to walk down the streets, a city where people are routinely being accosted, being robbed, being beaten by gangs. You look at New York City and you look at the damage that civilian review board has done there. It's demoralizing for police officers to, at every second, risk your life, but then have some untrained civilian Monday morning quarterbacking you, with a cup of coffee in their hand in a warm office, watching some videotape and saying, I would have done it that way, right? Which it's insane.
Right.
It's absolutely insane. And in many cases, you have these race hustlers who are appointed to these boards who go in and they just want to harm police officers. That's the agenda. It's you're guilty until proven innocent, right? It's the exact opposite. And they do a tremendous amount of damage, maximum damage that they can, and handcuff the police And the end result is that you're left safe, your family is less safe. It's not something that we'd ever want to see here in Suffolk County. This is a fair balance where they do have an oversight job. They are issuing this report. We're working collaboratively. It is that second set of eyes. They get to look at this and say, hey, we disagree here. It's open to the public. It's transparent, but it's not an untrained civilian, which is essentially affecting a witch hunt for police officers. And that's really what civilian review boards have morphed into, is witch hunts for law enforcement.
And by all accounts, it seems like our department is doing a great job of being transparent with the HRC. So with that collaboration, it seems to be working out well as of now that they're going back and forth.
Right. And having that inside view of what's going on from our interactions here in the office, it's comforting to me as a Suffolk County resident that we have this sort of system in place that has been by and large successful. And like we pointed out earlier, it's really the headline that was the issue here that kind of gave this whole story a negative connotation when really it's a story of success.
It is. And again, I think that's why there is so much skepticism when it comes to the media. And it's why traditional media is sort of devolving, and it's having a problem with survival. I mean, I know the younger generations, my kids, they wouldn't know a newspaper, if it bit them, right? Like they're getting all of their news through the phone, through influencers, through podcasts. They're not going to these traditional news outlets because they distrust them. And again, I don't blame the individual reporters for these things. They're limited in what they can do. They're limited by the format itself. They're limited in that it is a business, right? It's like any other business. Healthcare, right, has its problems because it's the healthcare business and profits get prioritized over health. News is a business, right? It is the news business, and profits are prioritized over anything else. And I think that, it's a limitation of the system. But when you have a format like this, a format like nobody's trying to make any money off this podcast, by and large, on most of these podcasts are not out there to make money. So I think in those cases, there aren't sponsors. There's nobody that we answer to. I think in those cases, you're really getting a much more fair and balanced look at Suffolk County policing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lou. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to come on here and really share our views from the union standpoint and public safety.
My pleasure, gentlemen. Great job.
Thanks for coming on again, Lou.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.